Hello, thanks for joining Techie Personal Finance Bootcamp. I'm excited to bring you today's episode, which is should I withdraw from my 401k or your 401k for that matter? And this is a super common question I get all the time. There's all kinds of reasons why someone might want to withdraw from a 401k, and sometimes it makes sense. But the biggest thing is, well, we want to tackle the pros and cons, what the other alternatives are, and just make sure that they're making an informed decision because if they're not, that's usually when mistakes happen and they end up being shocked by either the penalties or the taxes, or maybe they didn't even need to go that route to tackle their goal that they're trying to achieve, anyways. And so that's why this is an important topic. And I can't say how many times I've covered this with so many different clients for so many different reasons. And the common reasons why someone might do it is a lot of times there's an emergency, some brand new situation comes up and they're kind of freaking out, like, where am I to get the funds for this thing? So an emergency is definitely one reason why you might want to explore cashing out your 401k. There might be other reasons not to do it. So we'll definitely go through the pros and cons again in detail so you understand, like, hey, just because it's emergency, just because we're freaking out, let's slow it down. Let's make sure we get enough information so you can make that best decision for you. Another reason that I commonly see why folks reach out, and again, it's another one of those kind of panic reactionary type things, is they're freaking out about the stock market for one reason or another, something they heard about, something they read, something they saw on TikTok. There's so many different things that can cause people to freak out when it comes to the stock market. And they just want to remove the money from being invested in the stock market. The nice thing with that is it's a pretty easy fix without having to cash out the 401k. And that's just simply moving it to something that's very conservative. Most 401k plans are required to have a conservative option where it's either called like a stable fund or a money market fund, something where the value is not really going to change no matter what the stock market does. So if that's a big concern for you, if that's something that you just kind of need that peace of mind, you still want to make sure you're making a good long-term choice. So I'm not saying go ahead and do that, but I want you to know that that option typically is there, and it helps you avoid all the nasty downsides and the cons of cashing out of 401k. It's just simply putting it into another investment where it's not really that much of an investment. It's like a cash savings account, a money market. Again, no real risk in those types of accounts or those types of investments that should be available in your 401k. If you're not seeing that, definitely reach out to your employer or the plan advisor, the financial institution, however you communicate with those companies to make sure that you understand what your options are there. So now those are very good reasons, those first two, to kind of dig into it. Some of the other less popular ones that I would recommend as a reason to cash out your 401k is lifestyle. And this could happen if you just don't want to say no to yourself, no to your fiance, spouse, children when it comes to just kind of lifestyle expenses and just spending. And so the reason why it's never a good idea to cash out your 401k for lifestyle expenses is because you're not tackling the root problem. So just because you can't afford your lifestyle now, if you're currently employed, there's really no emergency that's causing this situation. It's really just your spending. You're trying to stick a Band-Aid on something that's already infected. There's already a lot bigger issues, and a Band-Aid's not really going to solve anything. It might give you the appearance that things will be okay, but what happens in this example when you're using it to kind of fund your lifestyle, just to do your normal everyday, every month expenses and spending and just kind of living life a little bit freer? Well, eventually that 401k is going to run out and be depleted, and you're still going to be used to spending those things. You would have actually reinforced those bad habits by allowing yourself extra months, extra years, possibly, to be kind of draining your 401k, draining your retirement accounts to live a lifestyle you really can't afford. So my recommendation there is, like, hey, you might want to kind of dig into the details a little bit more and figure out, well, if it's a spending problem, well, how do we fix that versus trying to supplement your spending and supplementing those bad habits and encouraging those bad habits, because they're going to be hard to change regardless. But the longer you have these bad habits, the harder it's going to be to make those changes and make those adjustments. So another thing that kind of falls in there, similar to lifestyle, is vacation. So yes, vacations are valuable. They create awesome memories and things like that. But unless this is truly like a one in a lifetime, never going to have this opportunity again because of some unique situation, you probably really don't want to rely on tapping into your 401k just to kind of fund what really is a lifestyle expense as well. So vacations are lifestyle expenses. And if you do it this one time, well, you're probably going to lean on that. And I haven't even gotten into the cons of doing it beyond, well, you're reinforcing bad habits, and that's not going to be sustainable once you run out of retirement assets. Well, once you run out of retirement assets, those create other problems too. So I'm just kind of barely hitting the surface on some of the problems that could create. So, what are the other downsides, whether it is for emergency purposes or for removing it from the stock market? What are the potential downsides of cashing out that 401k? And the biggest thing that some folks see, and they're like, ah, yeah, I can kind of absorb it, not a big deal. 10% penalty on your withdrawals from your 401k accounts, from your retirement accounts if you take those out before you reach age 59 and a half. There are going to be a few times where there's exemptions and things. I'll talk about those in a little bit, but that's a big one. So 10% right off the bat. So if you had 100,000 and you cash out the full 100,000, that immediately drops to 90,000. Well, what also happens is any income you've earned for the year, as well as this new income that we're recognizing, if you're cashing out traditional 401k funds which have never been taxed, so they're going to be taxed on the way out. And so if you're at a high tax bracket, like the 32% tax bracket, well, that's another 32,000 from this example that is now gone. So now there's 42,000 gone from the 100,000. That's not leaving you with too much. If you're in a state with high income tax brackets, well, guess what? Those also will be taken in, and sometimes California and New York are going to be the higher state taxes that you'll run into. But anything is still meaningful, right? If you're in Colorado, it's about 4%. It's about the same amount in Illinois, I believe. And so you'll want to factor all these things in. And at the end of the day, you might end up with a very small fraction of what you thought. So if you had $100,000 balance, you're like, oh, sweet, I'm going to use this to tackle debt, take care of this emergency, all these different things. And it's like, well, once you pay taxes on it, that 100,000 could very easily, depending on the state you're living in, come to 50,000 or 45,000 if you're really already in the highest tax brackets across the board. It's like, well, that does not feel good. So those are the big downsides: the 10% penalty, federal income taxes, state income taxes if those apply. Very brutal, very brutal. One thing that could help alleviate some of that pain is if you've ever made Roth contributions, you want to make sure that you've kept track of those Roth contributions, because you can take out Roth contributions out of the plans without penalty on those and without taxes on those. So that is a pretty sweet feature of Roth contributions. Any growth on that though, so if those Roth contributions have grown and you pull out the growth portions, you are paying taxes on the growth, and you are paying on the 10% penalty on that as well. So that's where it starts to get a little bit trickier there. And then the biggest downside that a lot of people don't think about, because it's hard to think long term, especially in today's modern world where everything we're thinking about today, this month, maybe at most this year, and we'll figure out the rest later. We had all the time in the world to figure this out. Not always the case. And the problem with retirement funds is that once you kind of tap into those and cut out a big chunk and remove it, well, they're no longer invested for long-term growth, which could potentially be negative if all of a sudden we hit some crazy economic growth that folks aren't expecting, and that grows substantially. Well, you miss out on all that growth. And also you just are using those funds obviously for something else. And so those assets are just going to be gone. You're going to be starting from scratch. You're starting from a lower point from whatever that withdrawal was. And you don't have more time to catch up for retirement. Every day, every year that goes by, we have that much less time between now and when you're potentially going to retire to try to make up that ground. And so it's becomes a heavier burden to cover and handle. And I've met with a lot of folks where it's like, man, I wish I wouldn't have done that. And so just take this all into account when you're trying to figure out whether that's going to be the best decision for you, because it is going to increase stress later on, and a lot heavier load to lift if we're starting from a drastically lower point. when you already have funds there, right? We're talking about this because you must obviously have something there to withdraw and take out. And so it is meaningful. And any amount you take out, how are we going to recover from that? So, a couple of strategies that I think are important to review and see if they might be a better fit for you is a 401k loan. So, the nice thing about a 401k loan is you're able to take funds out of the 401k without paying that 10% penalty and without paying taxes. So, it's like, wait, all that craziness that we're running into, I can avoid. I actually have an older, probably it's like 2 or 3 years old, but still pretty relevant today, podcast on 401k loans, and you can kind of dive into that. Might be some overlap from today's topic, but the big things that you need to know today is you typically are allowed to withdraw up to 50% of the account value, up to $50,000 maximum loan. And so that's going to be typically the baseline. And then you most times have to pay it back within 5 years. And that comes out of your paycheck typically. And so that's super, super convenient, super easy. It helps you avoid those penalties and taxes. And definitely something worth exploring a little bit more. If if you're like, yeah, I still need these funds, like nothing's going to change the fact that I need these funds, and the 401k is the only source to kind of tap into. But it might be an option where it saves you a ton amount on taxes and kind of comes up with a game plan of, well, how are we going to replace these funds and get them back invested for you? Other things I've mentioned are there are sometimes exemptions, and the goofy things with the exemptions for taking out of the retirement accounts early is sometimes there's different rules for the 401k versus a traditional IRA account, and also different rules for a Roth IRA account. So there's various exemptions for education, home purchase, emergency health expenses, paying medical premiums if you're unemployed. So there's a lot of different exemptions that come up, but sometimes the rules are different between if you're taking funds out of a 401k versus a traditional IRA and versus a Roth IRA. So just make sure that if any of those exemptions apply to you to avoid the 10% penalty, make sure you understand, well, does that apply to the account that you're going to be using or withdrawing from? If not, is there a way for you to maneuver these things before making that distribution withdrawal from the 401k? Another cool feature, if you happen to be a little bit older and checking out this video, is if you reach age 55 and you're still employed by that employer, you have the ability, a lot of times, almost every 401k I've ever looked into this for my clients that are near retirement, is after you reach age 55, even though you're not past 59 and a half, which is the typical age to be able to distribute and withdraw from your 401k account. If you reach age 55 and you're still employed by that employer, you can then start to make distributions and withdrawals without that 10% penalty. If it's going to be a taxable distribution, so anything on that traditional 401k side, anything on traditional IRA side, still going to have to pay taxes on those bad boys, but you do not have to pay the 10% penalty. So that's something that makes things a little bit easier there. And so, yeah, I can't state it enough that the taxes and penalties are really the biggest con. And then there's well, what the heck? How are we going to build this back? How are we going to have funds and resources for the future? Those are going to be the biggest cons by far. So definitely look at those different alternative strategies for you. Definitely go over the pros and cons of like, what do I really need to do this? Are there other resources you might be able to tap into? Another one I didn't mention is home equity line of credits. Typically, you don't want to do a cash out home refinance now, even though there's crazily enough, like a lot of mortgage lenders trying to get people to do cash out refinances, even if you have a low interest rate. Like, you do not want to do that. You want to keep your low interest rate, not do a cash out refinance. Instead, the better option would be a home equity line of credit, where leaves the old mortgage account alone, not messing with that low interest rate. Then you have a line of credit that just in case of emergency, or it could be a home equity loan if you know the certain amount that you need. And that will still be a relatively low interest rate relative to going into credit card debt. Sometimes there's 0% credit card rates and balance transfers and all these different other kind of hiding things underneath the shell and moving things around that you can do, similar to the lifestyle expense. Like, you want to be careful with any of these things while you're tapping into resources, because they can reinforce those bad habits, bad spending, and it's just kicking the can down the road, going to make things harder. And if there's really just an underlying thing that, well, it's not because of a layoff, it's just because of spending that you're kind of running into, dramatically very different things, very different reasons why you might want to tap into your 401k. One example, real life example that me and my wife uses, we actually tapped into our retirement accounts when I launched my business. And luckily, launching my business, we started from zero income. So we were in the lower tax brackets, and there was a couple exemptions I was able to kind of maneuver for us during that time. So the taxes and penalties weren't that big of a deal. In our minds, we were changing it from investments that were kind of stuck within a 401k to investments that were invested in my business to kind of get that launched and going. And so there's could be a few other things that I didn't mention, like that example, that might be beneficial for you. If you have any questions about 401k loans, 401k withdrawals, any of the exemptions that you might think might apply for you, go ahead and shoot me an email, shoot me a message. Again, if you're a client, like, I'll be able to quickly analyze your situation. If you're not a client and just kind of want to provide me some details, I'll do my best to point you in the right direction. But thanks for giving this a listen and checking it out. And hopefully this is valuable to you, gave you some things to think about, and hopefully you can make a more informed decision if this is something that you're considering to cash out your 401k and making sure it's the best thing for you. Thanks, everyone.